Welcome to CIHT Podcasts.
Severe flooding has once again hit parts of the UK, this time during Storm Dennis, damaging homes and leaving many people stranded. We have a huge climate and ecological emergency challenge before us, and we are seeing significant changes in weather patterns, increased flooding, heating, etc. Today we focus on the extent to which green infrastructure and sustainable drainage can contribute to both adaptation and mitigation. Welcome to the first part of this two-part podcast series brought to you by CIHT. I'm your host, Justin Ward.
So my name is Jane Rickson. I am Professor of Soil Erosion and Conservation at Cranfield University. And my specialism is basically looking how we mitigate and adapt to climate change. Particularly, I'm interested in how we can use vegetation, for example, to cope with some of these extreme events which are going to become the norm, particularly increase in runoff events because we're having more rainfall, more intense rainfall, duration of rainfall and the magnitude of that rainfall.
So why might green infrastructure better be called blue infrastructure? George Warren, who works for the Greater London Authority in the Climate Change Adaptation team, explains.
I'm George Warren. I work for the Greater London Authority in the Climate Change Adaptation team, and I lead on the promotion of sustainable drainage systems across the piece, leading on a project called the London Sustainable Drainage Action Plan. It looks across a variety of sectors, has 40-odd actions for us to deliver over the next 20 years, one of which being highways and transportation. So green infrastructure, to me, also includes a blue element, but on the whole is nature-based solutions to problems that we have. And I like to think of it's not just about trees and plants, but it's also about bringing water to the fore in our urban realm. So it's about those wet areas as well. And one thing I should point out is that when we talk about sustainable drainage and we use the term rain gardens, for instance, they're not wet the whole time. Most of the time they're dry. Most of the time they look like a garden, and you wouldn't, I suppose most people wouldn't realise that they necessarily perform a function when it comes to severe rainfall. But we're certainly seeing a lot more rain gardens across London.
One city that has attracted the attention for leading the world in addressing the urgent challenges of climate change is Sheffield. Zac Tudor, Sheffield Council's principal landscape architect, has hosted delegates from Malmo in Sweden. Groups from South Korea, Japan and the Netherlands have also visited to see how measures to combat global heating can be built into everyday settings. London is also interested in what they're doing. So let's hear from Zac, describing what the Great Green Project looks like.
My name's Zac Tudor. I work for Sheffield City Council, and within the council I'm principal landscape architect. We do a number of projects ranging from all different sort of matters really, but we do a lot of our work in the city centre spaces. And on the Greater Green Project, I was the lead project officer for that scheme. It's a much reduced carriageway, so we had 4 to 5 lanes of traffic. Now it's just 1 lane in each direction, just servicing local access, local needs, drop-offs and so on and so on. So there's a much reduced amount of vehicle traffic in the area anyway. We've got much widened out footways, which sort of meander a lot more through the vegetation and the suds and the rain gardens. So I wanted to sort of create that feeling of being able to immerse yourself in a meadow-like environment, so you're sort of flowing through, so there'll be planting on both sides, you in a lot of places. So you do feel like you are part and parcel of that green landscape. But really, the planting style, I suppose you call it, it's naturalistic, but it's not a meadow. It's not treated as a meadow. It is a multi-layered structural planting, really, where you get the trees for height, shade and framing of views. You get shrubs in there, which are multi-stemmed, so coppiced back occasionally, and they create additional structure. The meadow-like canopy layers create that sort of flowing, sinuous forms throughout the street. And it's sort of combating the harder, harsher, rectilinear shapes and forms of the buildings and so on. You get emergent species of really high intense colours, shapes and forms that sort of come out from that sort of the meadow-layered structures. You get loads of bulbs in there, packed full of seasonal variation. And then we've really gone to town with the grasses and the different types of grasses to create that texture and movement throughout the year as well. So we've really tried, and I'm trying to visualise this and describe it as we sort of speak, but it is those sort of multi-layered approach to sort of the planting, which has really sort of gone to town on that.
The Sheffield Greater Green Project won the CIHT Streets and Places Award in 2017. One of the key elements of the project was based on sustainable drainage. Sustainable drainage is a concept often applied to towns and cities which are especially prone to flash flooding after sudden heavy rain. In urban areas, large areas of concrete and tarmac, as well as the roofs of buildings, are impermeable to water. Rain is channeled straight into drainage systems which can quickly become overwhelmed. I love the name of Sheffield's project, the Greater Green Project. It illustrates how the grey, the impermeable, and the green, the permeable, need to be balanced. Sustainable drainage guidelines suggest that impermeable surfaces should be replaced with permeable material, allowing rainwater to drain into the ground, a process known as infiltration. Large detention basins can be also built to collect rainwater and hold it, managing the volume of water entering urban rivers, while ponds offer further water holding capacity.
My name is Rob Webster. I'm a senior civil engineer working for an engineering consultancy called Civic Engineers. So I'm primarily a drainage engineer. So I'll just talk generally about kind of subs themselves, but they're split into 4 areas of benefit. You've got water quantity, water quality, biodiversity, and amenity. We should always be designing with emotional intelligence to ensure that we're achieving as much of these benefits in all our designs as much as we can. So water quantity, I'd argue, is the absolute minimal requirement. So we're dealing with the surface water so that flooding isn't caused, and that the rainwater is kind of held back at a reasonable rate prior to discharge into whatever it's the kind of system it's connecting into, if that's a river, a watercourse, or a sewer, or some kind of wider drainage network.
Climate change is predicting that that rainfall is going to change in a sense, and we are going to have hotter, drier summers. But when that happens, when it does rain, it's going to be fierce at that point, and that ground is going to be parched. You're going to see extensive rainfall runoff occurring, which takes pollutants with it, but also it's a flash flood, and that's the last thing we need. So we need to be adapting to this. We can't rely upon our conventional drainage systems going forward to manage that in their own.
In 2007, Sheffield experienced heavy flooding, and this led to the city really looking at how they manage extreme quantities of water.
Hello and a very good evening to you from the Look North newsroom. Tonight there's a major rescue operation underway in Sheffield following the terrible weather that's brought chaos to Yorkshire.
Yes, RAF helicopters have been airlifting people stranded by the rising water from buildings.
So, one solution was the Greater Green Project.
2007, this was really the sort of the honing of our minds, really, in that the city suffered major river flooding. And that really resulted in sort of huge financial damage and loss of life in the city as well. So it was a big step change in how we perceive water in our cities and how we perceive going forward what our streets should and could be.
Generally now, what we find is that we need to accommodate our systems for like what's called a 1 in 100 year storm return period, plus also considering climate change. So that generally now is around kind of 40% climate change. So it really is kind of making sure that our features are future proof. And then from there, it's a case of running it through the software, which then looks at all these kind of different storm intensities, and you run like a suite of storm durations to really put the system in its paces as much as you can. So generally find that the shorter the storm, the more intense the rainfall is. So we really want to make sure that our system is fit for any kind of storm duration. But I mean, you really are putting it through its paces to like kind of Noah's Ark kind of kind of storm kind of duration and probability. So really high kind of tolerance.
So it really was focusing as the mine stuff really, and then the city took that decision back in 2014 that we would really sort of radically change, or would try to radically change how we view what a street could be, and started to put it out there, Not that every street would suddenly transform itself into a green oasis, but actually just looking at trialling these innovative green solutions, and actually also looking, could we reduce overall maintenance costs of our streets in doing this as well? So looking at, it really was sort of really trying to test and push the boundaries of what a street is and could be.
The second benefit of SUDS is focused on improving water quality.
And then water quality, again, that's now becoming a lot more as a kind of initial base requirement as well. So that's treating the water, so then it's removing the pollutants that are picked up on the roads, such as hydrocarbons, metals and sediments.
So green infrastructure is fantastic at actually bioaccumulating some of those issues. Not all of them. Some of those heavy metals will get taken up, and you'll need to therefore remove that green infrastructure over a course of period of time as the concentrations get up. But yeah, sustainable drainage, as we call it in this country, it's called a variety of things across the world. But in most other countries, the main driver is actually water quality to deliver it. In this country, we seem to be hell-bent on pushing it on flood risk, but actually the water quality benefits are possibly even better than the flood risk benefits that we provide through sustainable drainage. The issue has actually been that we haven't necessarily had a big driver for water quality. It's been the EU Water Framework Directive. We've failed, we've missed the targets on that, but there doesn't seem to be any huge repercussions on it. Someone might say if we had the same sort of bat to bash us with regards to air quality, and water quality were given the same, then maybe there'd be more of a concentration on it. I'm not necessarily asking for that, but I think we need to bear in mind that actually this is going to become a problem, and it's only going to get worse in the future, and we really need to start addressing it now. The Mayor recently did a study along with Thames 21, Middlesex University, and it was also funded by the Environment Agency and TfL, which looked at trying to highlight the roads with the greatest potential to have a negative impact on water quality in our watercourses in London. And so what that did, looked at annual average daily transport movements across the outer London road network, and it calculated what the concentrations of various contaminants might be. So it's not just the busiest roads, actually it seems to be where the heavy goods vehicles might travel, but also where they might break more, as when they break the various heavy metals that are given off. And what this mapping has allowed us to do and see where those most potentially polluting roads are, so we can start trying to highlight where we might want to invest in sort of sustainable drainage techniques that might be able to tackle that water quality element. In fact, we've just embarked on phase 2, which looks at both the potential opportunities around SUDS along the highway and along roadside interventions, but also in a catchment basis, so looking at constructed wetlands that might be able to take it further downstream. And so that's due to be released later on this year.
Addressing the issue of microplastics appears to be another benefit.
Bit of a buzz thing, but just looking at the containment of the microplastics from car rubber tyre, it's a huge source as an origin sort of microplastic that's going to our oceans. If we're sort of not flashing the water down into the gullies, into the rivers, if we're sort of putting it into the soil matrix, it's holding on to it, binding it together, and at least we're sort of holding on to it, and again we know where it is. It's not sort of finding its way through to the oceans. So I think all of these benefits we're sort of finding more, not quite a daily basis, but we are sort of really sort of it's an exciting time I think for our cities and highways and spaces that we have. We've got such a great opportunity to work with these things.
The third benefit was biodiversity. Biodiversity net gain is an approach to development that leaves biodiversity in a better state than before. Where a development has an impact on biodiversity, it encourages developers to provide an increase in appropriate natural habitat and ecological features over and above that being affected in such a way it is hoped that the current loss of biodiversity through development will be halted and ecological networks can be restored. SUDS, green infrastructure, is one method of doing this.
But we really should be looking to promote amenity, so that's kind of enhancing an area for people's enjoyment, and also promoting biodiversity, which is enhancing it for nature's enjoyment. So I think a perfect example of a SUDS is a wetland retention basin. So all that does is an area where water can come down to. It's collected within essentially a pond, but then you kind of promote the planting within the basin itself, so kind of like reed beds and various kind of fauna, just to promote the biodiversity of an area, and also, if you make it open for the public, it's then a nice amenity feature, and then it can become a nice feature from the site itself, and then it also ticks the water quality box, because it's naturally kind of breaking down all of the kind of pollutants, and you can create like sediment beds and things like that, and have these like filter medium running through them as well, so which you can treat the pollution really well there, and then regular maintenance to take out the sediment. So you find that a lot of the pollutants are attached to the sediment itself, so essentially if you collect the sediment and then remove it through kind of appropriate means, then you've kind of dealt with a lot of the pollution treatment there as well. And then again, the quantity side of it is picked up because you're using the feature as a storage to kind of attenuate the flow before it goes to discharge.
So another benefit of the vegetation, of course, is not only is it adapting to some of these extreme events, it also helps to mitigate or even reverse climate change in the sense of carbon sequestration. The vegetation, through the process of photosynthesis, is able to sequester carbon out of the atmosphere, and through organic matter, it's then putting that carbon into the soil, where carbon is very important for soil biology, which affects things like nutrient cycling, but also is just a fantastic store of carbon, taking it out of the atmosphere, and therefore, as I say, hopefully reversing some of the emissions that we're getting through agriculture, for example, because you're taking that carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it into the soil via the vegetation organic matter. So these are another example of how vegetation can be used to reverse and mitigate and adapt to climate change.
The final benefit of SUDS was focused on amenity. Does the concept of SUDS and green infrastructure help also address the urban heat effect, support good mental health, aid regeneration, and so on?
Mainly that healthy streets agenda that's really we're trying to push to the fore. But that's, it's concentrating on a modal shift, but also creating places that people want to be. And that includes green infrastructure heavily in that. And that goes throughout both the London plan and the environment strategy. With London plan pushing forward the urban greening factor, which will also help with regards to that placemaking. But we've got various policies within the London plan which help promote greater green infrastructure and also sustainable drainage as part of that.
So in terms of these multifunctional, multi-beneficial aspects to the greening of our public spaces that we're doing at the moment in Sheffield, obviously climate change resilience and adaptation for our cities has really come to the fore, and it has sort of focused our attention over the last 3 or 4 years, I suppose, into what are the other benefits we can look at in terms of these green rain garden approaches in our sort of dense urban environments. And one of the big ones has been coming out of PhD researchers that have been working with the university, has been the city cooling aspects to all these sort of healthy urban spaces. We talked about the trees and the shade from the trees, which is obviously having quite a dramatic effect. But also it's that dense herbaceous layer. A lot of the research is showing that it actually absorbs and holds on to a lot of the heat.
Urban environments that have water on the surface tend to be cooler. They are our cool spots. And actually, we shouldn't be scared of having open water. Sheffield has numerous places that have open water. They brought it to the pool. And actually, those are the places that people tend to congregate during those hotter spells. We shouldn't be scared of necessarily having that at the front. Now, there are health and safety implications, but there's health and safety implications of a lot of things. It's just a different way of thinking about it.
And, we've seen quite remarkable differences in air temperatures over planted areas to over the hard paved spaces, reaching up to 10 degrees of difference in one particular day. We need to do much more research, I think, to understand these fully. But actually what we're starting to see, and, when you actually go and experience the spaces down there on really hot summer days, you do get that sort of feeling that actually these spaces are feeling a bit more cooler and much more comfortable to be within.
I mean, some of the stuff up in Sheffield is phenomenal. The Greater Green Project, I mean, it just changes the look and feel of the highway. If honest, I'm not sure that people walk past it and necessarily think of it as a flood risk or a water quality scheme. They see it as a phenomenal urban realm, you know, an urban regeneration that incorporates a great deal of, you know, of biodiverse planting. Something that we would love to do, and we've been up there on numerous occasions to look at it, to study and how we might incorporate it. And we've sent various TfL engineers and borough officers up there to gain, you know, to get those ideas, harness those. They took a great leap of faith going up there, you know, and doing that stuff. And I think that we, you know, what we need to do is possibly mimic in that respect. There's certainly things we can learn from that.
Yeah, number one, again, for me, from a benefit perspective, is placemaking and the identity for Sheffield. It really does create those new incentives to visit a space. And, you know, it's just much more attractive and tangible for people to actually be within, really.
I mean, there's so many studies at the moment into you know, why having nice green open spaces are positive for the community. I mean, there's like kind of public safety, mental health kind of, and well-being, and that whole kind of community feel. There's a lot of evidence as to, you know, why we really should be kind of promoting this as much as we can in every development, really, you know.
I mean, again, we've talked about it, but that attractor for economic regeneration and investment in the area, the sustainable urban drainage, which we've discussed, flood mitigation and future-proofing those water management issues in the future. You know, these things look great, they smell great, they sound great. Health and well-being is a massive part of this as well in our cities today. You know, it's such a stressful, harsh environment, our urban spaces, and if we can do something to sort of going towards improving quality of life, encouraging exercise and relaxation, it's all going to be a much, much more beneficial approach for us ourselves if we can immerse ourselves in these seasonal changes of the greening environments, really. And alongside all of that as well, it's about local air quality. It's sort of a well-known fact that, you know, a dense area of planting between pedestrians and vehicles can act as quite a good screen for those negative elements of the atmospheric pollutants. So again, we try to create those sort of buffer zones to that. I mean, from my perspective, we've narrowed carriageways quite considerably. We've sort of taken away white lines, but also the planting and the lack of curb edges has really helped, I think, in terms of speed reduction as well. So the vehicle speed reduction, I think, has really, you know, started to sort of pay dividends on that side of it as well.
Thanks for listening to the CIHT podcast. This is the first of a two-part podcast series. The next episode will look at trees, bioengineering, permeable paving, and what technology can do to support measures to address the climate emergency.